Hi friends, very exciting conversation here. I have Sanjay Swamy, a rock star in the investing space. He's an angel investor who has a company called AngelPrime. He runs it with a couple of his partners. Sanjay himself is a serial entrepreneur. He has helped spawn a lot of very interesting businesses, including one that you would have heard of called M-Check. So Sanjay now has a couple of very interesting businesses as well that he's spawning. And without further ado, Sanjay, shall we get into the business? What kind of businesses do you have? What is your model? How does it work?
First of all, thanks for chatting with me about this stuff.
Absolute pleasure.
It's great to be here. So I run an incubator called AngelPrime, which I started with two other serial entrepreneurs, Bala and Shripati, both were founders of Snapfish amongst other startups. And we basically felt that there was a gap in the market for entrepreneurs who were passionate, wanted to do some great stuff, but needed to build a team together, needed some mentoring, needed guidance, needed capital, and really the early stage of a company, which is where most of the startups ultimately end up with a very high percentage of infant mortality in startups, or severe damage being done to them because they did not pick the right partnership, the right business model, the right investors, and so on. And make sure that during that phase, which we believe is also the most exciting phase of the company, because that's when you can question everything, right? And that's the phase where we want to play in and work with. We spend a lot of time, we're full-time working on this, and it's literally 24 hours a day. But which means we can only work with a handful of companies at any point in time, 2 to 3 companies. And plan is every year we would do 2 to 3, maybe 5 companies amongst the 3 of us.
Very cool, very cool. And you obviously get hands-on very upfront on these things, right? It's not like you just sign the check away and then they do what they need to do. You actually jump in along with them and sort of are in the trenches, as it were, right?
It's very, very deep down, hands-on. I keep telling people the analogy of water. Whatever gaps are there in the company, we go and
you
fill
help.
them. And hopefully over a period of time, those gaps go away and the company is a little more stable. In some ways, it's also like parenting, because you don't get to do the stuff, you get to teach someone to do it, but in the beginning, you get to do a lot of it. But it's very, very satisfying also to to see over a period of time that you're no longer needed, or you're not copied on an email conversation, and that's something that you need to feel good about.
Very cool.
As opposed to feeling ignored about.
So absolutely.
That takes slightly, interesting DNA, but we're enjoying it.
How do you, obviously one of the things is, since you're also putting the money and you're also investing and, you're also role-playing the cards there, how do you sort of, you mentioned this ownership thing, how do you sort of disconnect when you need to disconnect? Obviously, because it's an entrepreneur that's actually doing that. What do you do? What do you have to make sure that you are able to disconnect when you need to?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, our most precious commodity is time, right? And secondly, we have raised capital from other people, so our responsibility to them is very important. So I think we have to make sure that both of these are used very carefully by the companies. And once we feel comfortable that the company is running well, the team is in place, the team is synced up, the money is being spent very carefully and well, and the business is sort of well defined and mature, that's when we back off. It may take 3 months, most likely it will take 18 months, right? Somewhere in between.
Very cool. A couple of companies that these folks are working with are very cool. I mean, all your companies are cool, of course, but the 2 names that comes to mind, one, they are doing some very interesting work in mobile payments with a company called EasyTap. That's still under wraps, and Sanjay and the entrepreneur will talk about it later. The other one that we can talk about is ZipDial, with who I've already done a blog position. That's also one of the companies that's incubated by AngelPrime. Both of them are very, very, huge scale, global ability. There's a lot of very interesting storylines that are coming out of it. Do you have a set of selection criteria?
Legally, ZipDial was done before AngelPrime. It was the precursor. Okay. So it's not officially under the AngelPrime umbrella, but all of us are involved in it.
I see.
And I work very closely with Valerie and Amia, and Shripati is an advisor.
Brilliant.
And
Excellent. So is there, when you look for organizations, what are the kind of choices, criteria? Obviously, it's not just the business model. There are some viewpoints in the business model, there's some viewpoints in the people. What do you look for?
For us, it's the people and the domain, right? So the domain must be a substantial, large, $100 million opportunity, which means it should be probably $1 billion opportunity, and with reasonable execution you can get to $100 million play. The people are the most important asset, and the reason for that is, it's a bit cliched, but ultimately none of us knows what's going to happen in any of these spaces. What you want to know is it's a big opportunity, and the people you have with you are smart enough to say, if plan A is not working, I'll quickly pivot, try out plan B, and so on. Most companies, and some great case studies of, if you look at InMobi, for example, it wasn't even called InMobi, it was called Coach. And Naveen will tell you, he's currently on the 5th business plan of the company, right? So the point is that, they're smart people, you give them responsibility, you give them an opportunity, you give them money and some guidance, and they'll figure things out, and that's the most important thing, really, is the people. The synergy between the people, how they complement each other, I always get in a business plan with two engineers who work together all their lives, say, the bad starting point, because you really need differences, you need to complement each other. So that's what I meant, rather than differences.
I see.
And you really need to complement each other and round out the team.
Uh-huh.
Two identical people, it's very unlikely that they're going to pull off something spectacular, unless one of them takes a very different role, which can happen. If you look at the Flipkart example, yes, they ended up taking different roles, though their backgrounds were similar.
I understand. Okay. The other side of the coin, as it were, what should an entrepreneur be looking for when they're looking for raising money? What kind of people should they be looking at talking to?
I think the most important thing is, how are these people to work with, right? What am I going to keep learning from them? Because there are multiple sources of funding. I know if you have not yet raised money as an entrepreneur, it's like the most scary thing, but I always remind entrepreneurs, your problems start the day you receive funding. Till then, you have a different set of problems, but you really don't have longer term problems. It's once you've received funding that you have the responsibility now of executing, and you are going to work alongside the quote-unquote investor. So really there has to be a meeting of the minds, time frames, ethics. Ethics is like very, very, very important here. I think we all realize that we want to go home at night, look our kid in the face and say, this is what daddy did or mommy did during the day, and feel comfortable saying that. And you need to sleep at night, right? Those are two key requirements. So, but the other person, the investor that you're partnering with, must also have very similar ethics and work ethic with you. So I think culturally, it's, do they bring some unique experience that's of value to me, and can I get along working with these people? Because the fact of the matter is, another cliche I use is, entrepreneurship is about 5 days of glory and 360 days of sweat in every year. But those 5 days of glory make up for the 360 days of hard work. But when the going is tough and there will be more things going wrong than right, you need to be able to work with this partner. Are they going to work with you? Are they going to be patient with you? Are they going to help? Or are they going to say, it's just not working out? So I think those are the important things to look
But
for.
a lot of these things are difficult to sort of assess through a bunch of meetings, right? How do you sort of, how do you suggest that entrepreneurs go about assessing them?
I agree, it's not easy. If it was, everybody would have been doing it. And that is the hard part, right? Some of this, unfortunately, you will only learn with experience.
Yes.
And sometimes you might get lucky, which is great, right? But I think, a lot of it is gut instinct. A lot of everything about entrepreneurship is, more often, your gut instinct would have worked better than the plan. And I think when you meet people and when you talk to people, you will realize that.
Okay. Very, very nice. The last question, Sanjay, and your personal journey. So you've spent 11 years in the Valley or 11 years in the US. You are from Bangalore. You were brought up here. You're a Josephite and a UVC graduate. Tell us about what drives you. What is your motivation for doing things?
Yeah, well, I think I always, I've had a wonderful experience and journey, and very fortunate to have lived through Silicon Valley in the 90s and lived through the first part of this decade in India, and seen a lot of things, sometimes from the sidelines, sometimes been in the midst of things. Had the privilege of working on the UID project closely with Mr. Nilakani as well. MCheck was a very exciting phase, trying to do something pretty radical at a very large scale. So I've had a lot of awesome exposure to things. But fundamentally, grew up here, did engineering in UVC, Went and studied in France for a couple of years, then in the US, but lived in Silicon Valley. What drives me, I think I've always been in areas where change has been happening at a very large scale, particularly in the Valley in the 90s and in India here. India has tremendous opportunity. I think what drives me is trying to find that perfect balance of something which is for profit and yet really changing the lives of people that are
Privileged. Well, best of luck and congratulations.
Thank you.